All right.
Not yellow or not orange, not red anymore.
So I'm starting off with yellow, and this time I'm gonna go light in the sky to dark on the horizon. I'm just switching it up, right? Just switching it up. Try not to do the same thing over and over again, right? But here's what you're gonna see. It's easier to go dark to light
Yes.
than it is to go light to dark. And you're about to see a good example of that. So we're gonna go light. And really, this is just, look, I'm putting a lot of water in here just to create a bead. The other thing is, look at the angle I'm working at.
Yeah, you're
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to use an angle, right? The gradations are way easier when you have an angle. You're using that gravity.
So we're going light to dark.
We're going light to dark. We're just getting crazy with it. Crazy, I'm telling you.
And that's alizarin.
No, this is just yellow ochre. It's a little dirty yellow ochre, but it's yellow ochre. The one thing about yellow ochre is it dries much lighter than it goes on. So you have to get used to the shift in yellow for sure. It's definitely one of the harder colors to work with. If you ever paint a yellow painting, which we will, you're going to see
the darker.
yellow is probably one of the more challenging colors to work with. Yellow, every color is challenging. I'm not going to say.
I think reds are challenging.
Yeah, reds are definitely challenging. Greens are challenging. Pretty much everything's challenging.
As you're going darker, you're not changing colors. You're still in that same color.
I am.
I mean, in order to get that darker color, you're having to use less water, right?
I'm using more and more pigment as I go.
But
I'm keeping my water pretty close to the same. I'm just adding more and more pigment.
But do you notice like it's hard to keep your bead at that point? Because as I add more paint, the bead seems to go away.
Add
And
more.
then I'm like, well, now I gotta add some water.
Yep.
Gotta get bead.
And you're right. I mean, that's the challenge.
Oh, okay.
How far down are we going?
All the way to the line. We're going all the way down. And remember, there is such a thing as, this is as dark as I can go on one wash with yellow, right? I mean, I could tell you this is about it. I mean, I'm not going to get a whole lot more yellow than that.
Right, because the value scale on
So
yellow
if I
is
want to get darker, I'm going to have to start throwing in some burnt sienna, which I'm getting ready to do.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm even going to throw in some ultramarine blue. And then we're going to let that dry. You can see my streakiness, not the best wash, but decent. Now, if I want to play with it a little bit, I wouldn't let it dry. I'd start turning it, and I could start working on some of those gradation problems.
Okay.
And I don't really want to go back into it with water at this point. The same thing will happen as what happened to Pam's over there when I tried to help her out, is it'll start, it'll just wash out too much pigment, and it'll wash out all my gradation. So in this case, it'll dry. You know, we're looking for smooth transitions. That's our goal.
Well, sucks. Then I go to the next one. Well, that one sucks too. And stories that I
Well, and our goal, one of our goals is to do a really nice painting you're going to be happy with.
Yes.
And you can see I'm reducing the amount of pigment, increasing the amount of water, getting a pretty good transition going here. And my water's so dirty that it's not going to let me get down to a really not bad. Be real careful if you ever paint to the bottom of your paper. Watch, especially if you're working at an angle, watch that you don't create a bead sitting along the bottom edge of your paper, because it will blossom, it'll cauliflower and turn into, it'll ruin a good painting. So always watch for this bottom edge down here. If you're doing a full sheet, I always pick it up and dry it at the bottom. Keep an eye on it. You don't want it to. That's working at an angle issue, right? Start with your heaviest mixture of pigment to water. You know, kind of like a, not quite butter, but like more like milk. More like a milk consistency. And as you work this, and you're going to a transition down here, you're transition through tea all the way down to just clear water, right? So what I'm doing each time I go into it is I'm adding more and more water and less pigment. And see, so Patty, one thing I want to recommend, you're using little small brush strokes and you're doing a little dabbing. Big brush. So I should have said this. We want to touch this the fewest number of times possible.
Okay.
So we want to go with big brush strokes. If I could do this whole thing in 10 brush strokes, that would be the best way to do it.
Now see, look.
So now add more water.
You still have bead there.
You do have. You're not failing. There's no fail in this class. There's no fail in this class.
Oh, sad.
This is learning environment. This is safe zone. There is no. This is safe zone. One thing I want you to point out is this wash with the waves in it should be transparent. You know, our goal here is to see the blue through the burnt sienna. Take every advantage of watercolors. Transparency, nature. When I'm making these waves, I'm going in with kind of a tea consistency. I'm going over it with burnt sienna over the top of my ultramarine blue. I want to be able to see the ultramarine blue through my burnt sienna.
You do.
They're complements of one another, so I'm not trying to paint opaquely over the top of my wash. I want each layer to build on the one before it, right? So in this case, you know, I'm about 60%, maybe 50% burnt sienna, and about 40-50% ultramarine blue. But I put the blue down first and went over it with the burnt sienna. I want to have that transparent nature of watercolor. That's when watercolors start looking fresh. They start looking vibrant. They start looking unique. doing really cool things.
So you
Oh,
don't want
we
to
were
mix
using-
them on your palette?
No.
Oh.
All my mixing here, guys, almost all my mixing is happening on the paper. I'm really, if you look up here, you can see I almost have nothing but burnt sienna over here, and I have mostly ultramarine blue on the left. I have mixed in, at times, I mixed in a little alizarin crimson, or I mixed in a little yellow, a little burnt sienna, but I'm really trying to keep my pigments as fresh and clean as I can, and I want the mixing to happen on the paper.
Oh, we're using yellow.
Hmm?
Are you using yellow ochre and?
Yellow ochre. And I use yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. Yellow
Down to the
ochre.
bottom, he added the burnt sienna.
Yeah.
Bottom of the yellow, because he couldn't get any darker.
So when I want the really
I'm
dark,
talking about in the
in
middle one.
this one started off with a alizarin crimson,
Yeah,
then it went to yellow ochre,
yes,
and then at the bottom I added a little bit of ultramarine blue.
yeah.
And then I went really dark ultramarine blue, and then when I put in these waves, that was just burnt sienna, a wash over the top of my ultramarine blue.
Oh, I thought you were using the black, so.
Never used black, never used a gray.
I mean the
But keep
the
in mind,
burnt ochre and the blue. I
if
thought
you
that was a mix of those two.
I did too.
the ultramarine blue and the what?
And
Burnt
burnt
sienna.
sienna.
Burnt sienna.
There is a little bit mixed together.
No.
It's not just straight.
No, on our palette.
So I do have a mixture. It's a gray. That's how I got my gray.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Because I did mix it on my
Right.
palette too.
And that's fine. So this is a mixture of ultramarine and burnt sienna. But my point being is, you guys are trying to recipe this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't recipe it.
Yeah.
This is not baking a cake.
Right.
This is just, first go with the ultramarine wash, right? And then the grays that I'm getting is from mixing ultramarine and burnt sienna together. So when I need it a really dark, I want to darken it up. I'm going to mix those two together. So I have a little pool over here where I have mixed burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And that's how I got the really dark boat. That's how I got a little bit of the darker waves up here. But the further I go down, I'm easing off of the pigment and just sticking with water. And it is a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. I'm going with the gray into the waves. So in this case, I'm going into my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'm making it pretty dark. I'm making it pretty dark gray, and I'm going to put in my boat. I'll come up with some. We'll do a pier. Or we'll do something different.
So you're
Some
never
mountains.
mixing paints on your paper?
I am. Am I mixing paints on the paper?
Yeah.
I do both. All these gradations is mixed on the paper only. I'm not mixing them on the palette.
But if you had just put down the ultramarine blue for the waves and then put the burnt umber.
Burnt sienna.
Burnt sienna over the top on the paper, would you get the same results?
No, it would not. It would look more brown. I mean, it depends on how much pigment to water I used. But in this case, I wanted a gray, and I'll show you what I'm talking about in a minute. Right now,
I got brown, not gray.
well, then you used too much burnt sienna.
No, I did it on the paper.
If it went brown, then you used too much burnt sienna. But in this case, I'm just putting in some dark.
So that was mixed on your
This was
palette.
mixed already,
Right.
right? Already mixed. And I'm starting off with my waves kind of dark and kind of thin. Now I'm just adding water, and I'm thinning. This is again mixed burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And I started with kind of thin, and I'm getting thicker as I come down. And I'm mixing in more water. And look how it's this transition is happening where it's getting more translucent, right? And I have something of a bead working here. Now I'm going to rinse even more off, and I'm almost going with, I haven't put any more pigment on. This is just me working my way down. I'm actually now pulling out some moisture out of my brush and removing some pigment. So if I want to lighten it up a little bit, like I think this is a little heavy here, I could just drop in some water and watch it. Starts going right down. I will say when you mix the water on the paper, you're going to get these really great transitional colors, these transitional translucent look to it. If you mix it on the palette, it's possible to do a translucent wash off the palette of mixed colors, but it's not going to have the same look. So if you look over here, this first one, this was, I'm warming up, right? Look at how much better each one got as I went. So this is how I get ready to paint.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't go sit down and paint. Y'all saw my last painting, right? I don't go sit down and start painting on a freaking painting that I've got hours and hours and hours in, totally cold. That's a bad idea. You definitely want to get in, and what is this? Look at the headspace you're in now. Now I'm thinking about my water to pigment ratios. I'm thinking about my, if I just walk in and start painting, I am not going to get this kind of effect.